It was a typical November night in Oklahoma City, one of those cold nights where the wind cut through the skin and the lights of the gas stations flickered against the dark sky. Officer Derek Matthews was making his routine patrol along Interstate 40, a busy highway that cut through the heart of the city. He had 14 years of experience in the police force. He had seen it all, or at least he thought he had. That night, around 7:30 p.m., he spotted a faded red Honda Civic parked on the shoulder, right next to an exit leading to a commercial area full of fast food restaurants and convenience stores. The car caught his attention, not only because of its faded color, but also because of the rust stains that spread across the hood like old scars. One of the taillights was broken, patched up with red duct tape that no longer stuck properly. Matthews slowed the patrol car, observing. The Honda's engine seemed to be running. The smoke coming from the exhaust was visible in the frigid air. Someone was inside. Matthews activated the emergency lights and parked behind the vehicle. Before exiting the patrol car, he registered the license plate in the system. Oklahoma, serial number JKL 4892. While waiting for the computer's response, he observed the driver through the rear-view mirror. A black man, appearing to be between 35 and 40 years old, with short dreadlocks and thick-rimmed glasses. He stood there, both hands on the steering wheel, as if he already knew what was coming. The system returned basic information. The vehicle was registered, no theft reports, no warrants associated with the plate. Everything seemed normal. Matthews took his flashlight, adjusted the body camera attached to his uniform, and exited the patrol car. The cold wind hit his face as he walked towards the Honda, his right hand resting lightly on his holster, an automatic habit after so many years on the street. He tapped lightly on the driver's side window. The man inside the car turned his head slowly as if expecting it and lowered the window. The window slid down with a mechanical creak, the kind of sound old cars make when every part is begging to be replaced. The man's face was calm, almost resigned. His eyes, behind his glasses, were tired but alert. Matthews leaned slightly, illuminating the car's interior with his flashlight. The back seat was empty, except for a worn backpack and some crumpled plastic bags. On the dashboard, an old air freshener hung from the rearview mirror, swaying slightly in the cool air coming in through the open window. "Good evening, sir," Matthews said, maintaining a professional but not hostile tone. "Are you all right?" The driver nodded slowly. "Yes, officer. Everything's fine. I just stopped to check my phone." Matthews observed the man for a moment. He seemed nervous, but not the kind of nervousness that indicated immediate danger. It was a different kind of tension, something deeper, as if he were carrying an invisible weight. "You know you can't stop on the shoulder unless it's an emergency, right?" The man nodded again. "I know, officer. Sorry, I was just trying to get my bearings." Matthews nodded. "May I see your driver's license, vehicle registration, and insurance, please?" The driver hesitated for a split second, then reached for the glove compartment. His movements were deliberate, slow, as if he had learned the hard way that sudden movements during a police stop could end badly. He pulled out a worn leather wallet and handed a document to the officer. Matthews took the driver's license and examined it under the flashlight. The name on the document was Marcus Anthony Jefferson, date of birth, March 15th, 1982. The address listed was Tulsa, about 150 kilometers northeast. The photo showed a younger man, clean-shaven with a shy smile. Matthews looked at the driver again, mentally comparing them. The resemblance was there, but something seemed off. People age, he thought, especially if life hasn't been easy. He returned to the patrol car with his driver's license in hand, leaving the man waiting in the Honda. As he walked, he couldn't shake a strange feeling, an intuition that experienced officers learn not to ignore. Something was off, but he couldn't quite pinpoint what. Sitting in the patrol car, he typed the name and date of birth into the system. The screen flickered, processing. Matthews drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, waiting. When the result appeared, he stood, motionless, reading and rereading the words on the screen. Marcus Anthony Jefferson. Date of birth, March 15th, 1982. Date of death, July 8th, 2015. Deceased 9 years ago. Matthews felt a chill run down his spine. He glanced at the Honda through the patrol car's windshield. The man was still there, motionless, waiting. It wasn't a ghost, that much was certain. But who was he? Matthews picked up the radio and called the dispatcher, requesting backup. He kept his voice calm, professional, but there was an underlying urgency. I need a second unit at my location, Interstate 40, near exit 141. Possible use of false identity. The dispatcher confirmed, and Matthews hung up the radio. He picked up the driver's license again, studying every detail. The document looked legitimate. The hologram was correct. The texture of the plastic was authentic. If it was a forgery, it was one of the best he had ever seen. While waiting for the backup, Matthews began mentally reviewing possible scenarios. Identity theft was the most obvious, but why would someone use the identity of a person who had been dead for so long? And how did that person obtain such a convincing driver's license? There was something more going on, something beyond simple document fraud. 3 minutes later, another patrol car arrived, its blue and red lights reflecting off the windows of nearby buildings. The officer who got out was Jennifer Cortez, a veteran with nearly 20 years of service. She and Matthews had worked together several times, and he trusted her instincts as much as his own. "What do we have here, Derek?" Cortez asked as she approached. Matthews showed her driver's license and quickly explained the situation. Cortez frowned, taking the document and examining it closely. "This is strange," she murmured. "Did you confirm the date of death?" Matthews nodded. "Double-check. Marcus Anthony Jefferson died in 2015. Car accident in Tulsa." Cortez looked at the Honda. "And the guy inside? Does he know we're checking him?" "Probably," Matthews replied. "He's too calm. Either he doesn't know the ID belongs to someone who's dead, or he knows exactly what he's doing." The two officers approached the Honda together, a standard strategy for situations where the dynamics could change quickly. Matthews knocked on the window again, and the driver lowered it, looking at the two officers with that same resigned expression. "Sir, I need you to get out of the vehicle, please," Matthews said. Maintaining a firm but polite tone, the man hesitated, then nodded and slowly opened the door. He got out of the car, his hands raised slightly, showing that he was unarmed. He was wearing a grey hooded sweatshirt and worn jeans. Dirty white sneakers completed the look of someone who was just trying to survive, not cause trouble. Cortez asked him to turn around and put his hands on the hood of the car. The man obeyed without resistance. While Cortez conducted a quick search, Matthews continued to observe, looking for any sign of suspicious behavior. The search revealed no weapons, drugs, or anything else illegal. Just a wallet with some crumpled dollars, an old cell phone with a cracked screen, and a pack of chewing gum. "Sir," said Matthews, holding the driver's license in front of the man, "this ID belongs to Marcus Anthony Jefferson." "Are you Marcus Jefferson?" The man looked at the document, then at Matthews. His eyes filled with something that seemed a mixture of fear and sadness. "Yes," he replied softly. "That's me." Matthews and Cortez exchanged a glance. Matthews stepped forward. "Sir, our system shows that Marcus Anthony Jefferson passed away in 2015, 9 years ago. Can you explain that to me?" The man closed his eyes for a moment as if gathering courage. When he opened them again, tears were welling up at the edges. "I know," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I know it says I'm dead, but I'm here. I'm alive." Matthews felt his stomach clench. This was getting stranger by the second. "Are you saying that you are Marcus Jefferson, the same person our records say died in 2015? The man nodded. "Yes, officer. It's me. It's always been me." Cortez intervened, his voice skeptical but not hostile. "Sir, if you're alive, then why does our system say you're dead? How is that possible?" The man took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly against the hood of the car. "Because they said I was dead after the accident. But I didn't die. Survived. Matthews frowned. What accident? The man swallowed hard. In 2015, I crashed my car in Tulsa. It was bad. Very bad. They took me to the hospital, and I was in a coma for weeks. When I woke up, they said there had been a mistake, that they had declared me dead by mistake, but when I tried to correct it, nobody helped me. The records had already been altered. My death certificate had already been issued, and I didn't have money for lawyers to fight the system. So I just kept living, trying to survive with an identity that technically no longer exists. Matthews and Cortez were silent for a moment, processing the story. It was absurd, but at the same time, it had a disturbing logic. Bureaucratic errors happened, especially in overloaded systems, but an error of this magnitude, declaring someone dead by mistake and then not being able to correct it, it seemed impossible. And yet, there was a man, clearly alive, holding a driver's license that said he should have been buried almost a decade ago. "Sir," Matthews said carefully, "do you have any proof of what you're saying? Hospital documents, medical records, anything that shows there was a mistake?" The man shook his head slowly. "I did," he said, "but I lost everything when I was evicted from my apartment 3 years ago. I lost my job because I was officially dead. I couldn't open a bank account. I couldn't rent a decent place. Everything I had was taken when they threw me out on the street." Cortez crossed his arms, skepticism evident in his posture. "Sir, you understand how that feels, right? A man with the identity of someone dead, without any proof that he is who he says he is?" The man nodded, tears now streaming freely down his face. "I know," he whispered. "I know how it feels, but I swear, I am Marcus Jefferson. I am me. I didn't steal anyone's identity. This is my identity. It always has been." Matthews looked at Cortez, and she shrugged slightly, indicating she didn't know how to proceed. This was beyond a standard traffic approach. They needed more information, more resources. Matthews picked up the radio again and asked the dispatcher to contact the Tulsa Medical Examiner's office to check the 2015 records related to Marcus Anthony Jefferson. While they waited, Cortez suggested they take the man to the precinct for further investigation. Not as an arrest, she clarified, but for protection, and so they could uncover the truth. The man agreed without resistance. He looked exhausted, as if carrying the weight of this situation for 9 years had finally taken its toll. Matthews helped him into the back of Cortez's patrol car, while he himself would stay with the Honda until a tow truck could take it for forensic analysis. As Cortez drove to the police station, Matthews stood beside the faded red car, looking at it under the cold light of the roadside lampposts. The vehicle looked even sadder now, abandoned on the shoulder like a ghost of a life that should have ended almost a decade ago. At the police station, the man claiming to be Marcus Jefferson was taken to an interrogation room. It wasn't a suspect room, but a more comfortable one, with upholstered chairs and a wooden table. Matthews and Cortez sat across the table while a detective named Raymond Brooks joined them. Brooks had over 30 years of experience, most of it dealing with fraud and financial crime cases. If anyone could unravel this situation, it was him. Brooks began by asking basic questions. Full name, date of birth, family history, previous addresses. The man answered each question with details that would be nearly impossible to fabricate. He knew his mother's maiden name, the address of the house where he grew up in Tulsa, even the name of his 5th-grade math teacher. He described the car accident in vivid detail, the truck running the red light, the sensation of the rollover, the sound of metal twisting. Brooks took meticulous notes, occasionally asking follow-up questions to test the consistency of the story. After nearly an hour, he leaned back in his chair, looking at the man with an inscrutable expression. "Mr. Jefferson," he said, using the name deliberately, "I'll be honest with you. Your story is one of the most unusual I've ever heard, but it's also too detailed to be completely fabricated. I'll need time to verify everything you've told me. In the meantime, I need you to stay here. You're not under arrest, but you can't leave yet either. Do you understand?" The man nodded. I understand, Detective. Thank you for listening. Brooks left the room, followed by Matthews and Cortez. In the hallway, away from prying ears, Brooks turned to them. "This is going to be a bureaucratic nightmare," he said. "If he's telling the truth, we have a massive systemic error that needs fixing. If he's lying, he's the most elaborate fraudster I've ever encountered. Either way, we need answers." Matthews agreed. "What do we do now?" Brooks sighed. "I'll contact Tulsa, request hospital records, death certificates, accident reports. I'll need his fingerprints as well to compare with any records we can find. And you too," he looked at Matthews and Cortez, "will review all the body camera footage. Sometimes small details make all the difference." Over the next few hours, the police station transformed into a frantic investigation center. Brooks managed to contact the Tulsa Medical Examiner's office, which confirmed that yes, there was a death certificate issued for Marcus Anthony Jefferson on July 8, 2015. The cause listed was severe head trauma resulting from a car accident. But when Brooks asked for additional details, hospital records, autopsy reports, things started to get murky. The hospital where Marcus was supposedly taken had merged with another health system 3 years after the accident, and many records had been lost or misfiled during the transition. Brooks then requested fingerprints from the man in the interrogation room. He cooperated fully, allowing each finger to be scanned and recorded. The fingerprint identification system took 20 minutes to process, comparing against state and federal databases. When the results came back, Brooks felt a chill run through his body. The fingerprints matched Marcus Anthony Jefferson, born on March 15, 1982. Fingerprints recorded when he obtained his original driver's license in 2000. There was no doubt. The man in the interrogation room was Marcus Jefferson. But how? Was he alive when all official records said he was dead? Brooks returned to the room, holding a folder full of printed documents. He sat down again, looking at Marcus with a different expression now, no longer skeptical, but troubled. "Mr. Jefferson," he said, "your fingerprints match. You are who you say you are." Marcus closed his eyes, letting out a sigh of relief so deep it seemed to come from his soul. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for believing me." Brooks raised his hand. "Don't, and thank me yet. Because now we have a much bigger problem. If you are alive, then how was your death certificate issued, and why hasn't anyone corrected this in the last 9 years? Marcus opened his eyes, and for the first time since the approach, there was something resembling anger in his gaze. "I tried, Detective. God knows I tried. When I woke up from the coma, it took me weeks to be strong enough to understand what had happened. When I was finally released from the hospital, I tried to get back to my life, but my bank account was frozen because I was officially dead. My apartment had been emptied, my belongings sold or thrown away. I went to government offices, to the registry office, trying to explain that I was alive, but without money, without a lawyer, without anyone to help me. I was just another crazy person shouting that the system had made a mistake. Eventually I gave up. I accepted that I would have to live in the shadows, using an identity that technically no longer existed." Brooks wrote everything down, then looked at Marcus with something that could be considered empathy. "And how did you survive? How did you get food, shelter?" Marcus gave a bitter smile. "Paid jobs, construction, gardening, anything that didn't require paperwork. I slept in shelters, in the car, sometimes on the street. It wasn't a life, but it was survival, and I kept hoping that one day, somehow, someone would listen to me." Brooks nodded slowly. "Well, Mr. Jefferson, I think that day has finally arrived." The investigation expanded rapidly. Brooks contacted the Oklahoma State Vital Records Department, explaining the situation and demanding a full review of Marcus Jefferson's case. What they discovered was both shocking and disturbingly simple. In 2015, after the accident, Marcus had been taken unconscious to the hospital. Due to the severity of his injuries and the lack of immediate identification, doctors didn't know who he was for several hours. Meanwhile, at the accident site, Officers found his driver's license, which had been ejected from the vehicle during the impact. The license was covered in blood and partially burned by the fire that had started in the car's engine. A rookie officer, working his first major accident, assumed the driver had died at the scene. He filled out preliminary reports indicating a fatality. These reports were then forwarded to the medical examiner, who, overwhelmed and working with incomplete information, issued a provisional death certificate. When it became clear days later that Marcus was alive in the hospital, attempts were made to correct the error. But due to a series of communication failures, the correction was never properly processed. The system recorded Marcus Jefferson as deceased, and this record propagated through multiple databases, banks, credit agencies, and state records. When Marcus finally tried to rectify the situation personally, he was dealing with a bureaucracy that had crystallized the error. Every agency he contacted said they couldn't help him without documentation from another agency. It was a labyrinth of circular responsibility where no one had the authority or the will to simply press delete and correct the record. And Marcus, without financial resources, without connections, without anyone to advocate for him, ended up being forgotten. He became a living ghost, a man erased by paperwork. Brooks presented all these findings to the precinct captain, who immediately recognized the gravity of the situation. It wasn't just about Marcus Jefferson. It was about how many other people might be living in a similar limbo, erased by bureaucratic errors that no one cared enough to correct. The captain authorized additional resources for the case, and within 48 hours, public interest lawyers got involved, offering free representation for Marcus. A judge was contacted, and an emergency hearing was scheduled. At the hearing, Marcus sat beside his new lawyers, still wearing the same worn clothes from the night he was approached. The judge, a woman named Helena Torres, with over 20 years on the bench, listened to the case with growing disbelief. She interrupted several times, asking for clarification, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. When Brooks finished presenting the evidence, the judge turned to the representatives of the state of Oklahoma, who were present to defend the system. "Can someone explain to me," she said, her voice as cold as ice, "how a man can be declared dead by mistake and remain officially dead for 9 years, despite clearly being alive and trying to correct the error?" The state representatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. One of them, a young lawyer who seemed to be questioning his career choices, stood up. "Your Honor, this was a systemic error resulting from multiple communication failures. We recognize that Mr. Jefferson was severely harmed and the state is prepared to take immediate corrective action." Judge Torres narrowed his eyes. "Immediate corrective action. What does that mean exactly?" The lawyer consulted his papers. "We are prepared to issue a new birth certificate, cancel the death certificate, restore his legal identity, and provide financial compensation for damages." Judge Torres looked at Marcus, who sat with his hands clasped, staring at the table. "Mr. Jefferson," she said, her voice softening slightly, "do you understand what is being offered?" Marcus looked up. "I understand, Your Honor, and I thank you. But with all due respect, money won't bring back 9 years of my life. It won't bring back my job, my apartment, my dignity. It won't erase the nights sleeping in the cold or the humiliation of having to repeatedly prove I was alive to people who didn't want to listen to me." The judge nodded slowly. "No, it won't. But I will ensure you receive everything that is legally possible, and I will order a full investigation into how this happened to ensure it never happens again." The judge's order was issued that same day. Marcus Anthony Jefferson's death certificate was officially annulled. His records were restored. He was resurrected, at least on paper. But as he had said, the damage was done. 9 years of his life had been stolen, not by a violent crime or a natural tragedy, but by a series of bureaucratic errors and the systemic indifference of institutions that should protect people, not erase them. Marcus Jefferson's case became national news. Reports appeared in newspapers, news programs, podcasts. People were horrified, but not entirely surprised. In an age of digital systems and interconnected databases, the idea of being erased by a computer error didn't seem so impossible. Marcus received compensation from the state, enough to start over. He rented a small apartment in Oklahoma City, bought new clothes, and got a legitimate job. Slowly, he began to rebuild the life that had been taken from him. But the scars remained. He had nightmares about being approached by police officers, about seeing his own name on a tombstone. He developed severe anxiety around any kind of official paperwork, always fearing that another mistake would erase him again. For Matthews, the officer who had approached him that cold November night, the case was transformative. He had joined the police force to help people, to make a difference. But Marcus's case showed him that sometimes the system he represented could cause as much harm as any criminal. He began to advocate internally for better screening protocols, for additional training on how to handle complex cases that didn't fit neatly into standard procedures. Cortez was also affected. She began to question how many other people had passed through her police career, people she had dismissed as suspicious or problematic, who were in fact victims of flawed systems. She became more careful in her interactions, more willing to listen to stories that seemed impossible, because now she knew that impossible didn't mean false. Brooks, the detective who had led the investigation, wrote a detailed report on the case, which was shared with police departments and government agencies across the country. The report included recommendations for preventing similar errors, for creating safety nets for people who fell through bureaucratic cracks. Some agencies implemented the changes. Others filed the report away and moved on, too busy or too indifferent to care. For Marcus Jefferson, life went on. He made new friends, reconnected with family members who had thought he was dead. He began speaking publicly about his experience, not for fame or attention, but because he knew his story could help others. It could make people pay attention to the marginalized, the forgotten, the people the system treated as statistics instead of human beings. And perhaps, just perhaps, his story could prevent someone else from experiencing the same nightmare of being declared dead. Dead, while still breathing, while still fighting, while still clinging to the hope that someone, somewhere, would finally see them and recognize them as alive.